In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Today we begin Holy Week with the commemoration of two key events in Jesus' life. His triumphant entry into Jerusalem, acclaimed by the people as the King of the Jews, and the painful journey of his passion to Golgotha, where he will be crucified as a common criminal. We've told both of these stories as a spiritual preparation for the week ahead, when we will be Jesus' companions during his long journey to the cross, and as witnesses of his infinite love for humanity. Holy Week can be a very emotionally and spiritually and physically exhausting experience because we are invited to share in our Lord's suffering and also to perceive resonances of that suffering in our own moments of doubt and sadness, and struggle and desperation and death. It takes a great deal of endurance to deal with Holy Week. We know that that's what's going to be required coming up. So Jesus' story is also our story. We're walking with him in that story and seeing bits of our own lives reflected in those events. Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Great Vigil of Easter are not three liturgies. They're one liturgy, one story in 3 chapters. It's impossible to understand the full significance of Jesus' sacrifice without hearing the entire story of his passion, his death, and his resurrection. Our presence and our participation in the liturgy of the church during this week is one of the ways that we identify with the wounds of Jesus, one of the ways that we show our commitment and our solidarity with him in that suffering. So what I'd like to do today is to share with you 2 experiences from my own life where I have connected personally with the wounds of Jesus. The first comes from my process of becoming a priest, which was a process of about 6 or 7 years. The process in the Episcopal Church, as some people know,
all too well,
is very intense, very complicated, and especially very long. Because there are countless tests from the parish and the diocese, psychological evaluations, clinical training, and of course 3 years of formal studies in seminary, among much, much more. And so because this was such a long process, I kind of developed the tradition of getting tattoos to mark my progression toward ordination to the priesthood, far off in the distance, and as signs of my enduring commitment to the service of God and the service of God's people. The first tattoo I ever got came when Bishop Lee accepted me as a postulant and gave me permission to go to seminary to begin my formal education as a priest. So I found a tattoo parlor on Belmont Avenue in Chicago, and I went in and
Too hard.
yeah, and I looked at all the different designs, and I settled upon this huge Celtic cross. Of course, I couldn't start with something small and modest. No, I had to start with this huge, covers most of my arm. And I got it for my right arm, what I call my blessed arm, because this would be the arm with which I would bless the people after I got ordained. And I have to confess, I've had friends who have had tattoos and stuff, but until I sat in that chair, you know where this is going. Until I sat in that chair, I did not have a full appreciation of how painful that would be. So after several minutes in the chair, the pain was so intense that my eyes just started to water and just It was just like, the agony of it. And I realized that I had to have some way of coping with pain. Some way to focus my mind beyond focus my mind on something beyond the needle carving through my raw, bloody flesh, which is exactly what it is.
Yep.
And almost instinctively, I don't know how it happened, instinctively I started reciting the 5 sorrowful mysteries of the Holy Rosary as a way of just kind of developing kind of a mantra. Now, for any good former Roman Catholics out there, does anybody remember what the 5 sorrowful mysteries are? We talked about them they're mentioned in the Passion narrative that we just read.
The agony in the garden.
The agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. Why can you not stay up with me 1 hour, right? Before that one. Before that one, there's one before. The scourging, the flagellation at the pillar when they're whipping him, right? And then the third one is the crowning with thorns. The fourth one is,
Carries his cross.
right? He carries his cross. You can see it, right? Up there. And then the crucifixion. And in those 3 hours of the tattooing, I had an experience of Jesus' passion. I was meditating upon those mysteries, and I was identifying with the wounds, what it must have felt like, what it must have been like. 5 wounds in his hands and his feet and in his side, and the wounds inflicted by the whipping. And I had a new appreciation for what that was like. It became real and literally became embodied. Because I had the image of the cross on my very skin, much as Jesus had the marks of his passion on his skin. And it worked on me. It worked on me. And so I've gotten several more as a result, because there is something deeply personal that I had not experienced before. And so I enter into this time with a different sort of appreciation. I go back to those memories that evoked for me a Jesus who was deeply personal and deeply afflicted. And we are meant in our reading of the Passion narratives and in our experience of Holy Week, we are meant to develop connections between our own personal experiences. And they may not be physical wounds, they may be emotional wounds, they may be a divorce, it may be substance abuse addiction, it might be some terrible tragedy in our lives, the loss of a beloved spouse from cancer, death of a beloved child, unemployment. It could be any number of things, but we're meant to make those connections. And that's what we're invited into in this season, in this Holy Week. That's what we're invited to do, is to connect the dots between Jesus' own experience and our experience. The second story that I want to tell you is a happier story, and it's the story of yesterday. So yesterday, there were 13 of us who went down to Chicago and marched, actually 14, because you were there too, weren't you? That's right, you told me. And you were in St. Mark's in Glen Ellen was doing the march in Glen Ellen, correct? So we had at least 15 people from this parish involved in a participation in what is essentially a liturgical action. Because wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together in Jesus' name, he will be in the midst of them. And we were there out of our deep conviction that our children deserve safe schools, they deserve freedom from danger. They should be allowed to grow up safe without any threat to their well-being, so they can become educated and have a leg up in life and lead a life worthy of hope and joy and peace. And so it was wonderful being down there with all of these kids especially the kids from our parish, who were so well informed. They were deeply engaged. They were deeply passionate about this. And it was very clear. I was so proud. I mean, I'm not their parent, but I was so proud. That to see these people motivated by their conscience and really eager to stand up and be noticed and to raise their voices, to have an opinion. There's actually one great sign that said, if I am old enough to get shot, I am old enough to have an opinion about being shot. Preach. And so they marched and they were interviewed by people and they spoke so very eloquently about their experience and what was at stake. And it was clear to them and to me, and we talked about this, that one of the ways that we embody our faith, we embody our solidarity with Jesus, our identification with his wounds, is to be Jesus' hand and feet in the world. By doing risky things like that. By standing up and stepping out of our comfort zones and standing up for what's right. And those girls were a deep inspiration to, I think, the adults there who, I mean, we have some budding activists in our midst who take the message of Jesus very, very seriously. Do this in remembrance of me. It doesn't mean just break the bread and drink the wine. It means be like me in the world. Stand with the outcast and the broken and the endangered. Do this in remembrance of me. Speak out when evil is flourishing in the world. Do this in remembrance of me. Sing when there are moments of hope and joy and peace. Do this in remembrance of me. And that is what the message of Holy Week is about, is teaching us to be like Jesus, to embody in ourselves, in our own lives, in our bodies, the message of peace that he brought, in defiance of worldly authorities, but in fulfillment of the prophets. So as Jesus said, my dear people, do this in remembrance of me. Amen.
Amen.